Aquarius, hi, great to see you. This is your Aquarius June 2020 reading, and great to see Aquarius subscribers. Always look forward to seeing you each month. Do you know, this month we're going to use the Thoth Tarot deck. The Thoth Tarot deck has a lot of very interesting esoteric and spiritual imagery in it, so I'm going to use my pen here to point out a couple of the things that jump out to me, which I think you might find interesting. And so we'll do that. Now the other thing is a lot of people ask me questions about, oh, can you tell us about yourself? Tell me about yourself. I thought the easiest thing to do would be just put a whole bunch of those questions together, just sort of put them in a couple of categories and just sort of pick a few of them out there. It's like, when did you realize that when did you become clairvoyant? Well, if you look in the description below and at my website there, you can see that I do clairvoyant readings for people. Ever since I was born clairvoyant. When I was a child, I just knew things, and when I was at college, years later, a woman who was older than I did took me under her wing. In the old days, she would have been called a witch. Back then I referred to her as just being a very wise woman, and still do fondly remember her as a wise woman. And she put me through a number of her spiritual practices. Now there is the Three of Swords, and then sadly she passed away. Actually, she passed away at roughly the same time as the woman with whom my beloved, with whom I was in love, who died suddenly. Well, I won't go into the details of it, other than to say it was as if the sun itself was extinguished and no birds sang. And I grieved the grieving into the bowels of the earth itself. And then 6 months later, while still in grief, I was praying, I suppose, trying to make sense of it, when it was as if very dark sunglasses that I had worn since the time I was a baby were lifted from my eyes, and suddenly I could see everything, and I understood what was in this world and in the other world. And it became clear to me then that also that my task then was to pursue the spiritual path and to help other people, which is what I've done since that time. What's this one here? Death, great card. What's some other ones? Do I do other work? I suppose, do I have a day job? The answer is no. I just do the spiritual work. That's what I've done for nearly 30 years, I suppose. I mean, I was spiritual, obviously, before then, but I've concentrated on spirituality in that period. Healing, discerning of spirits, moving them on when they sometimes lodge into places and into people that they shouldn't be in. And so we do that. Children, that's a nice card. That's the Eight of Discs. All I say about children is I am a father, probably an unusual father, and I have more than one child. What's this stuff? Other areas of interest. Look, what I've done is over the last 25 years or so, there's the Queen of Swords. I've done very extensive, deep studies into cosmology, into quantum mechanics, particle physics, philosophy, and evolutionary biology. And at the end of it, I can tell you, I've read all the stuff, I've done all the things that they all do. I've done it in a very high order, and I can tell you that if any scientist or philosopher tells you that there is no divinity or that there is not life that goes on after this physical realm, they have no idea what they're talking about. They don't. Because I know. I'm not speculating, I know. Anything else there? Weaknesses? Well, there is the Seven of Discs. Weaknesses. I'm a straight male. That probably sums it up. Okay, let's see now. That's enough talking about me. Let's talk about you and see what there is in store for you this month. Okay, let's see what's going on in your life. Let's look at this card first, which is the Three of Swords. Now, in the Three of Swords, the three swords meet in the center of the rose, breaking it up against a dark and chaotic background. The astrology of this card for me is Saturn in the second decan of Libra. Okay? Now, Saturn is exalted in Libra. So ordinarily, we might expect to have really good fortune in this card, but with this number 3 here as well, this 3 has an association with Saturn for me. It's ruled by Saturn, this number 3, and so we get a double dose of Saturn, and Saturn is associated with limits, restrictions, time, form, and the suit of swords is the first suit to manifest away from the divinity, and so the suit of swords is especially difficult. Saturn applies its characteristic hard lessons on Libra's desire for relationships, as I see it in this card. And so sorrow is a natural event that most people have to go through at some point. Libra is associated with the Justice or Adjustment card, so there is a link in sorrow to the universal law of karma, or to cause and effect. Now, the Buddha said that all existence is inherently sorrow as we are separated from the Father. Well, there may be something in that, but there's great joy and happiness in this life as well, and you have been created not to be in sorrow, but you have been created to enjoy the world. Now, just looking at this imagery here, let's have a look at some of it. This main sword here really represents the sword which is in the Ace of Swords, but it's more damaged in this card, so the purity of the ace is quickly replaced by a damaged element here in the Three of Swords. It holds a rose in place and represents the main event of hurt in the past that may well still be influencing you negatively now. The two curved swords that we see here, well, they pick the rose apart. They represent the fact that we are out of harmony with ourselves at the moment, and they are sabotaging the present. They pick the rose apart. The broken rose is broken-hearted, felt to the core, and the background is all dark and chaotic. It shuts out the light of the present and envelops us in a dark situation that perhaps we may think that there is no way out of. Sorrow is like the dark night of the soul, which many experience before a real breakthrough into new positive beginning in life. So there may well be some sorrow over past hurts, losses, or separation, some melancholy, fears, or unhappiness, or a longing to be whole to be found in this card. There is, however, something that needs to be said to you at this time. It's the message coming through for me, for you, in relation to this card. And it is this: despite what you may believe, you can disappoint people and still be good enough. You can make mistakes and still be capable and talented. You can let people down and still be worthwhile and deserving of love. Everyone has disappointed someone they care about. Everyone messes up, lets people down, makes mistakes, not because we are inadequate or fundamentally inept, but because we are imperfect and fundamentally human, and expecting anything different is setting yourself up for failure, because nobody is perfect. I'm going to go to the diametrically opposed energy here. And this is an energy which is on the way out. Now, this Seven of Discs. In the Seven of Discs, the discs are arranged in a sort of geomantic figure with images of Saturn and Taurus on them. Probably the darkest card in the deck from an artistic point of view, with the dead or dying vegetation in the background. Now, the sevens in tarot suffer from moving away from the harmony contained in the six, and the sevens can be quite difficult at times. However, there are two centers of consciousness associated with this, or angels as you would like. The first is Harahel, and this talks about the ability to make a fortune through mental acuity. And there's another one, Mizrael, and it talks about, when negative, having chronic fatigue and then disobedience. But when positive, as I think it is in this card because it's on the way out, it talks about things turning around and benefic situations coming towards you. Now, the astrology of this card for me is, well, it's Saturn ruling the third decan of Taurus. Now, as I mentioned before, Saturn is a slow-moving and restrictive planet, and Taurus is a fixed earth sign, which is known to have its plodding qualities. So the two put together produce stagnation, really. Now, the author of the deck used failure here. I don't think it is. That's not the appropriate term. It's really one of stagnation, is the sense that I'm getting here. We have dying vegetation in the background, as you can see. And since life depends on the changing seasons, and indeed change in general, we have inertia or stagnation going on in the background. The vegetation is firmly rooted, so you may have the feeling that this stagnation is not going to go away quickly. And I just notice around the edge of these coins here that there are faded reds and blues around the discs, masculine and feminine energy. Yeah, surrounded by the brown of Taurus, which restricts their operation. So there's a sense of lack of creation or lack of fertility in the card. I really think that this marks what might be seen by you as being a difficult or potentially a difficult period in your material affairs. It marks a period where you feel you've put a lot of effort into something, and yet it has not yet yielded results. But I'm coming to something here which is taking its place, which is talking about results for you. And it's almost as if you've now stopped trying, and it's just sitting there. The energy is just sitting there in your life. The density of the vegetation in this card shows there is a lot of inertia about this. And it may not disappear quickly, but there are things you can focus on in the meantime. Now, although this seems too simple to do, you've got to try to rid yourself of fear over a particular situation and start sending out positive thoughts. Saturn partly gives rise to fear, and so you have to break out of its limiting mindset. Fear is also a big factor in failure, so it is useful to analyze where your fears are based and work them out of you. Try to learn from the setbacks as to why things have got to this point and what you can do next time to avoid this from happening. If you've been trying with someone in a relationship setting, then this effort probably won't bear you much fruit. It's better to save your energy and use it for something that is going to be productive for you. Being afraid of not getting anywhere and not being able to produce what you want to cultivate is a thought that you can have in your mind at this time, but it is being displaced by the central energy which is coming through, which I'll get to in a moment. Maybe you want to progress more quickly.
You know, it's really easy to read this thing in a negative way, but I don't think it is a negative card for you in this particular situation. And I'm going to say why, because it's followed here. That 7 of discs is followed by this 8 of discs. Now the 8 of discs shows a tree in the center of a garden against a yellow background and anchored in fertile land. The leaves are wrapped around the flowers, aren't they, which are the discs in this suit, in a very protective way. Now, the astrology of it for me is the sun ruling at the first decanate of Virgo, I think it would be. The other thing is this, is that with this number 8 here, I have a mystical association with the planet of Mercury. Now, this number 8 is ruled by Mercury and is its highest aspect. And in ordinary astrology, like I said in the card, I have the sun ruling Virgo. Well, Mercury in ordinary astrology rules Virgo, and it is also exalted in Virgo. So this is a very productive partnership. I think it signifies that intelligence lovingly applied to material matters will bear fruit. The sun enhances everything it touches, and here it energizes Virgo's hard work, ethic, and attention to detail. So in this card we see really for you the opportunity for growth into something worthwhile. Just to have a quick look at the imagery on it, it's quite simple, this one, at least for me, but then I'm pretty simple, I suppose, is that I notice that the fruit in here has 5 segments, and each of the flowers has 5 petals. Well, 5 plus 5 equals 10. Now 10 is representative of the material universe, that is after it has emerged from out of divine spirit, and therefore it represents tangible things becoming manifested in your life. The flowers, as I mentioned, are being protected by these leaves that are growing around them. So be protective of your dreams and plans and nurture them until the universe, until the time, until it becomes time to manifest them, as it will. Don't overextend yourself, and be quite discriminating about what it is that you give out. Do you know, sometimes there is a strength in doing nothing at all. Sow the seed, sit back and wait for the harvest. I think you need time and patience to develop something. Don't rush it, as it's a long-term thing, and be prepared to bide your time and let it come to fruition. This energy in the 8 of discs is encouragement to keep doing what you are doing, as it will eventually lead to success. Now, of course, it will require a lot of dedication, focus, and patience, but as time passes, and as you stay true to your values and beliefs, you get a little closer to your goal. That may not be readily apparent to you, but events are unfolding in the background that will lead you to your destination. Continue working on yourself too, and making ongoing improvements and adjustments to ensure that you are the best person you can be. Sometimes additional training and study is involved, and this is a perfect time to do that, isn't it? They may be needed to advance where you want to go with projects. And time and work is necessary for this. I think that this is also talking about you having the requirement to properly manage your energies between the different aspects of your life. I'm going to turn to her now. I love this woman. The Queen of Swords. Well, the Queen of Swords sits on a throne on top of cumulus clouds with the severed head or mask of an old man in her left hand and a sword in her right hand. In the card, we have the principle of the old severed head and the young, because you might be able to see like a little baby cherub or a baby above her head. The upper part of her body is naked, but the lower half is covered by a free-flowing sarong. Now I see a lot of Virgo around here, and I see a lot of Libra, so I think they are going to be important to you. Now just to look at some of the symbology that's in this card here. First of all, her upper body nakedness. This is really showing that she is not afraid to show her vulnerability. She knows herself and is able to see into others. The sarong here really demonstrates that she has the ability to go with the flow in her situation. The sword, which is in her right hand here, is really talking about her ability to analyze and cut through old ways of thinking and acting so that she can live in the moment. She is very logical and intelligent. All of this has the advantage of gaining clarity in situations, but being able to work through things intellectually to a high standard as well. She is very analytical. Very razor-sharp mental ability. Sounds a lot like you, doesn't it? And she has enormous clarity and the intellectual ability to judge and to discern impartially. I think also in this particular case, without the influence of strong emotions or sentimentality. Unlike the Queen of Cups as an example, who the Queen of Cups connects to other people through an emotional understanding, where at the moment here, I think this is talking about you connecting to other people through an intellectual understanding. Now the throne, well, her throne is really a cloud, and cloud is air, because remember she's in suit of swords, which is air. And the intellect, I think, therefore, is her main form of communication. The cherub is talking about seeing things fresh and without prejudice. This crystal helmet that she has here is talking about clarity and vision, and there's all clear sky around here, which is talking about clarity of mind and of vision. Now, I think what's happening here is that, let me just think. You must use your unbiased intellect in order to make a decision of a particular situation, drawing upon facts that go with it from your experience. Now, empathy or compassion towards others may distract you from making the correct choice, so it is important that you think with your head and not with your heart at the particular time. Don't let your emotions get in the way, but use fact and logic to make your decisions. I've got the feeling that you could really be quite good at counseling people during this time, and I wouldn't be surprised to see people coming towards you for counseling, for advice. I'm very much getting the energy that this for you is not really a time to be beating about the bush over a situation. A logical decision is needed, so you need to communicate clearly and concisely at this time. Cut through old patterns holding you back and see things as if through the fresh eyes like the child here. So it's a time to dispense with the masks of life and to have the courage of your convictions to move forward in a fresh way. I think that when you cut through your masks, you will feel liberated. Masks have their time and place, as long as we understand that they are masks. Now, here we go. Wow, look at the symbology in this. The Death Major Arcana card. Well, do you know, death is the fundamental basis of a spiritual path. Not necessarily dying physically, but dying to the world. It leads from one transformation to another as we shed the old and take on even finer forms of identity resting in spirit. That process has been described in spiritual texts before. I mean, some of you, one of them which comes to mind is the Christian New Testament letter from the Christian Saint Paul to the Romans, and I'm sure it was in chapter 8, verse 6, where he said, "For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace." Spiritual work is about dying to the lowest expression of ourselves. And in meditation, we die to the world. Now, let's have a look at the card. Well, this is a departure from what you may be familiar with in the Rider-Waite image, because the skeleton is seen at the bottom of a sea here. And this black skeleton, I would say, is a reference to the Egyptian god Osiris, because he died in the waters. And I think that this is really about transformation and resurrection. Now, there are a couple of interesting things here. First of all, there is, from the developer of the deck, the attribution of Scorpio to the card. And there are, I'll get to the forms of Scorpio later. And here is an ancient biblical Hebrew letter. You're probably thinking, what's that thing there? Well, that is Nun, and it means fish. And the fish has become a direct symbol of the fertility of Osiris, I think, and of a dying god. Dying gods are associated with the sun, and they have, and also associated with the number 6 in tarot. Looking at some of the symbology here, I mentioned that this was a Scorpio card, Scorpio energy over it. Here's 3 forms of Scorpio. First, there is the scorpion itself. It then transforms into a snake, and in its highest, most exalted form, it is an eagle. Now, legend says that when a scorpion is in a situation that it can't win, it stings itself to death. But in this card, it represents the gross illusory side of death. By denying our infinite spiritual nature, we also die to life, and living it fully with purpose. The lily on the left-hand side here and the lotus on the right-hand side are both associated with Saturn. So being shaped like the Alpha and Omega respectively, they are showing that the scorpion represents physical life being trapped in the limits of time. Now let's have a look at this serpent and the fish. Well, this is life as a flux between conscious living and unconscious living. Life and death are 2 curves of the same serpent. The pair also represent the masculine serpent and the feminine fish in union, depicting the act of creation, and to that end they are placed just behind the origin of the phallus. If you can look at this looks like a phallus coming up from this skeleton Osiris, so they're placed there, so there's fertility and creation going on. Now, this eagle, as I mentioned, is the most exalted form of Scorpio, and it represents death of the ego and subsequent oneness with God. The eagle represents the ecstasy of the spiritual orgasm that initiates the creation of life in many respects. The 3 figures of Scorpio are also, Scorpio is a water card, and Scorpio is a water sign. So the 3 figures of Scorpio are also associated with the 3 states of water. First of all, we have the hard shell of the scorpion being ice, the fluid form of the snake being water, and then we have the exalted form of Scorpio being gas, which rises into the air. There are a number of people, man, woman, child, in these bubbles that are here. They really show figures of various ages, and the bubbles are held together with the threads which are forming the phallus of Osiris. So here we have the 2 sides of Osiris, with the scythe being this thing here. He destroys life, and with his phallus, he creates life. And we could see this in the context of an individual soul incarnating in different lives, being the bubble, through the creative will of life. We can also see a soul going through, away from, you can maybe imagine away from reincarnation and going towards this light up there. Now, Osiris is a black skeleton. He is in black, as I think black is the color of Saturn. And he dances with Well, he dances because it's about change and transformation, which is a good thing, and he prevents stagnation in our life, right? Which is what we were talking about down here. Well, he's preventing stagnation. And it's obvious from the symbolism of the card that his scythe gives rise to new life in the bubbles. Okay, now, what might we say about this? Something in your life is dying, dissolving, disintegrating, whether it be a structure you have created, a pattern, a habit, or a way of thinking about yourself in the world. This is necessary for new beginnings and transformation of your life. It's a period of great transformation and facing your darkest fears, but the darkest hour is just before the dawn. In order to grow, you must abandon the old, and death is your protection against stagnation. As you change, you are forced to leave behind that which you have outgrown. Now, if your life is passive, your life's tasks are not being completed, and death may not be evident. On the surface, things may seem stable, and yet we are here to learn and to grow, and therefore when our life is active, we are continually changing as we follow our deepest purpose. Death is then your servant as you evolve, completing your life's lessons in this incarnation. Growth involves facing your fears and breaking your limits of existence. It's a time to cut away that which does not serve you or your life's purpose, similarly as to what this lady was saying here. That's the way it is for you this month.
Well, you were fantastic in that reading, as you always are. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did providing it to you. Do you know, I love doing these readings for you, and I'm glad that you get so much out of it. Now, make sure to check out the description if you'd like to have a personal reading, and just let me say this. You are a legend, and I look forward to seeing you again next month. But until then, it's bye for now.